Hello, Holy Trinity, from the west coast of Ireland. I'm at the wild Atlantic Sea. It is Tuesday, the 8th of August. Our readings for Mass today are drawn from the Book of Numbers, Psalm 51, and the Gospel of Matthew. The reading from Numbers is a fascinating, distressing, and a little bit humorous account of a conflict between Miriam, Aaron, and Moses. The responsorial psalm is a prayer for forgiveness, and the Gospel is the familiar story of Jesus walking on water and inviting Peter to have faith that if he trusts in Jesus, he can do the same. In my reading of these texts, I'm caught by the themes of courage, true authority, and trust. Last Sunday's Gospel from Matthew told how Peter, James, and John see Jesus transfigured before their very eyes as Moses and Elijah appear, and Jesus converses with them. For the past month, Moses has appeared over and over in our readings for daily Mass. It began with Moses being saved as a baby by his sister Miriam, and then later Moses with siblings and fellow prophets Miriam and Aaron leading the Israelites escape from Egypt and into the wilderness, where, as we know, they will wander for 40 years before arriving at the Promised Land. The grumblings have begun against Moses, and we heard yesterday when the children of Israel lament ever having left Egypt. And Moses is seriously aggrieved. And you hear him complain to God, "Why are you so displeased with me that you burden me with all these people?" And then he basically says, "Please, just kill me now so I do not have to deal with this." And we've probably each had some version of this conversation with God. Why are you doing this to me? Why are you punishing me with this particular burden? And even though we know it is not sound theology to think that when something bad happens, it means God is displeased with us and punishing us, it can still feel that way. And indeed, in Scripture, especially in the Hebrew Scriptures, there are many bad situations that are explained as caused by God's anger, displeasure, God's punishment. And one example of this is the biblical view of the disease of leprosy as God's punishment for sinful behavior. And in today's reading from the book of Numbers, Miriam, Moses' sister, is stricken with leprosy. And this is explained as the result of her sin, of questioning her brother Moses' authority. So let's spend a minute looking at today's Old Testament passage, which begins this way. Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses on the pretext of the marriage he had contracted with a Cushite woman. The way the United States Catholic Conference of Bishops website explains this passage in a footnote is, quote, "The apparent reason for Miriam's and Aaron's quarrel with their brother Moses was jealousy of his authority. His Cushite wife served only as an occasion for the dispute." But not so fast. Every other translation I looked at has a version of Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Cushite woman he had married. Miriam is mentioned first in all the translations, including the Catholic, which meant in this case she took the lead in this complaint, and as we see, she gets the brunt of the punishment. A respected biblical scholar who converted from Judaism to Catholicism, whom I know, recommends a free biblical tool called Blue Letter Bible, where you can see the Hebrew and Greek words and how they're translated in different versions of the Bible. And she points out there's several different Hebrew words that are translated in our English Bibles as married or marry. There's a Hebrew word for marry that means specifically to marry your brother's wife if she's a widow. There's a Hebrew word for marry that means to have dominion over, to possess, to own. There's a Hebrew word for marry that means to become a wife. And there's a Hebrew word for marry that means to take, get, fetch, lay hold of, seize, receive, acquire, buy, bring, marry, take a wife, snatch, take away. It's this last Hebrew word that is used in today's passage. I'm going to move a little bit further from the water as I speak. So let's imagine in this passage, Miriam, who uses the word take in that fourth sense, let's imagine what she's doing is standing up for a woman, the Cushite woman. And what she's speaking up against is that her brother seized or snatched this woman against her will. Most of us don't want want to think of Moses as the kind of person who would take a woman by force. And certainly the author of the book of Numbers is included in that, which is why in at least this passage we hear what's actually kind of a funny hyperbole. Moses was the meekest or the most humble man on the face of the earth. But we get the picture. How can you question Moses, of all people? Moses, he can do no wrong. And so the story comes across as a cautionary tale. Bring a complaint against the respected man in authority and you will be punished. In Miriam's case, with leprosy and banished. She's sent away for 7 days. But there is more to this story. Neither Aaron nor Moses wants to see Miriam punished like this. I like to think they do not think she deserves it. Moses pleads with God. Please, not this. Pray, heal her. Perhaps she had a legitimate case to bring against Moses. And maybe Moses, in his humility, knows this. And the people of Israel seem to know it too, because if we read a few verses more in the book of Numbers than what is provided in our lectionary for today, we hear that Miriam was confined outside the camp for 7 days, and the people did not start out again until she was brought back. In effect saying, we are not going anywhere without Miriam. She had authority in this community. She spoke up with courage for the marginalized and victimized. She spoke, quote, truth to power. And she was loved by the people of Israel. And she was loved by her brothers, Aaron and Moses, who both advocate for her. I hear a message here for our church family, our sisters and brothers in faith, as we approach these final stages of our synodal process. We are not going anywhere without our Miriams. It makes sense to me that the responsorial psalm from Psalm 51, though written generations after Moses, can represent the true heart and voice of Moses. For I acknowledge my offense, and my sin is before me always. I have done what is evil in your sight. A clean heart create for me, O God, and a steadfast spirit renew within me. Perhaps this can be the stance of we the people, we the church, as the voices of the violated and the excluded, the vilified and the excoriated are heard in humility by those who hold positions of authority. I don't think it's a mistake that our gospel reading today shows Peter, the rock of our church, our first bishop of Rome, being told, take courage. It is I. Do not be afraid. As Peter begins walking on the wind-tossed waves of the sea. What an amazing feat! But as soon as Peter stops relying on Jesus, doubting that Jesus could possibly be stronger than this wind, he begins to sink. Jesus stretches out his hand and catches him, saying, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" So there it is. True authority and power comes from Jesus, from our God. We need not fear strong words like Miriam's or strong winds, even the winds of change, if we keep our eyes on Jesus. We as a community of faith, as a church, as a family, might take this message from our readings today. Recognize that we human beings, even our esteemed leaders like Moses, like Peter, are flawed and weak. There is none among us who can do no wrong. Each of us is in need of the occasional rebuke and reminder that we are not God, and that without God, nothing is possible. And likewise, with God, nothing is impossible. And that as we move forward as a church, as brothers and sisters in faith, we are not going anywhere without our Miriams.